Have you ever wondered why our parents' generation is always talking about the cinematic brilliance of old movies? These movies didn't have the same production quality we see today, but they had something else. These movies were revolutionary and defined an entire genre. All the major genres we see today, be it animation or sci-fi, everything was introduced with the backdrop of black and white movies. So why the incessant disregard for these films? Ironically, the audience for black and white movies is completely polarized, and you either love them or hate them. So today at Marvelous Videos, we're going to try to change your perception about sci-fi black and white movies and why they are so important for modern cinema. Because without the past, there wouldn't be any present. Similarly, without the original King Kong, we wouldn't be able to experience the picturesque battle of Godzilla and Kong today. Stay tuned as we traverse through time and take a look at sci-fi black and white movies that have stood the test of time and still serve as a great example of peak storytelling and visual effects. Before we get into this list though, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. King Kong, 1933. The first movie on this list is probably one of the most iconic movies of its time. King Kong was released in 1933 and completely took the cinema world by storm. This exceptional piece of filmmaking, directed by Merian C. Cooper, was considered a landmark movie due to its special effects and experimentation with new technology. But one more reason this movie is truly special is because it gave rise to an entire genre of similar movies that have earned billions at the box office. King Kong has a great story, and the special effects are to die for. The movie revolves around a group of filmmakers who discover a giant ape on an isolated island. This creature was considered a legend by the locals and was extremely strong, so they did what ambitious filmmakers usually do. They caught him and brought him to New York. The next thing we know, this ape has escaped from captivity and a final showdown ensues on top of the Empire State Building. The movie does a great job of combining elements of romance, action, and drama. People were actually rooting for the giant ape by the end of the movie. With path-breaking special effects, this movie was truly legendary. But what's even more legendary is the interesting way they show their effects. The Empire State Building scene in the finale uses a blend of live action and a miniature version of the building. It's ambitious, impressive, and indeed, truly legendary. Creature from the Black Lagoon, 1954. The Amazon rainforests have always been shrouded in mystery ever since they were discovered, yet we still haven't been able to map out the entire rainforest, and there can be devious creatures lurking in the shadows. The Creature from the Black Lagoon builds on this fear and focuses on the story of a scary creature lurking in the Amazon wilderness. A prominent researcher leads an expedition inside the Amazon rainforest and discovers a prehistoric creature thriving in the lake. Next, this creature develops an unfamiliar attraction with Dr. K. Lawrence and goes on a violent rampage, killing many. The movie ends with a battle between the team of researchers and the creature with their lives on the line. This movie makes it onto the list because of its revolutionary creature design. Before the release of this movie, no one had attempted such an elaborate design. It was one of the first monster movies of all time and soon gained cult status due to its significance. What's great about this movie is that all the underwater sequences are shot in live action without the use of any VFX. The Gill Man was a masterpiece for its intricate details and was also one of the first of its kind. Frankenstein, 1931. Frankenstein is an iconic movie and for all the right reasons. Directed by James Whale, the movie attempted something that no one had even thought of before. Frankenstein became a household name following the release of the movie, and credit should be given to Karloff's legendary portrayal of the character. It's the story of a mad scientist who's obsessed with experiments. His most obsessive project is assembling a human being made of dead corpses. This scientist sadly uses the brain of a madman to complete his experiment and makes way for a hideous creature. But this creature isn't a monster. Instead, it's just a misunderstood person trying to find its place in this desolate world. This movie established several horror movie tropes which are still in use today. The makeup and design of Frankenstein's monster gave many people nightmares. We're so used to seeing decent horror movies nowadays, but during that time, Frankenstein was something truly terrifying, inducing nightmares for days. This is one movie that stood the test of time and can rival many horror movies that are released even today. Flash Gordon. Before the legacy of Star Wars or the magic of Star Trek, we had Flash Gordon. This movie basically started it all and gave rise to many sci-fi movies of a similar kind. It follows a successful movie trope where a good guy goes against all odds to defeat the enemy and save the day. Things are different here because Flash Gordon is saving the entire planet from the evil villain named Ming, the ruler of the planet Mongo. This planet is set on a collision path towards Earth, and Flash Gordon will do anything to stop it. Directed by Frederick Stefani, this adaptation from a popular comic book was super successful. It was the futuristic setting and art design that truly took the audiences by surprise. It also had action-packed storytelling and thrilling drama, which helped it become a household name. There was even a TV series released the same year, and Flash Gordon soon became a staple to judge other sci-fi movies on. Godzilla, 1954. Everyone has heard about the movie Godzilla and the terrifying yet super cool creature behind it. Recently, we saw him in action in Godzilla x Kong, but let's turn back the clock a bit and take a look at the original Godzilla, released in 1954. Compared to more recent adaptations, the special effects might not hold up, but this movie was a true visual spectacle of its time. The black and white version of Godzilla was widely regarded for its special effects, especially the suitmation technique. There was an actor in the suit who played Godzilla as the kaiju monster destroyed entire cities in post-war Japan. Another reason behind Godzilla being an iconic movie is the recurring theme of post-war Japan. Let me remind you, this movie was released just 9 years after the horrifying events of World War II, and according to the written material, Godzilla, the prehistoric monster, got stronger because of the nuclear tests conducted in the Pacific Ocean. So you can imagine the plight of Japanese people when they see a radiation-charged monster that's taller than many buildings around. This movie was a pivotal part of Japanese cinema, and it was so good that America had to remake it in their traditional style. Godzilla, King of Monsters was released in 1956 and became a quick success. While the Japanese version was traumatic, the American version was filled with action sequences and total destruction. Both versions of Godzilla were super successful and gave rise to a ton of sequels and movies filled with monsters and other destructive creatures. The legacy of Godzilla is still going strong and will continue to do so as we develop more and more ways to enhance special effects and VFX. Alphaville, 1965. Noir and spy films were quite the craze during the Cold War era. Every famous director was experimenting with this genre as it was the demand of that decade. Alphaville, created by famous French director Jean-Luc Godard, attempted a noir film of his own with a unique twist. Alphaville had noir genre elements with sci-fi and remarkable filmmaking, but that's always expected from someone like Jean-Luc Godard. The movie takes place in a dystopian society where an agent named Lemmy Caution is from the Outer Lands. He's sent to the dystopian Alphaville on a mission to find another missing agent named Henry Dixon, and also to kill the creator of Alphaville, Professor Von Braun, who created a supercomputer named Alpha 60. This professor controls the entirety of Alphaville. Alphaville makes it on this list because it broke all the rules of conventional filmmaking and created a genre of its own. Jean-Luc Godard created entire dystopian sets in Paris during the 60s. Alphaville is also shot on a minimal budget and still looks super cool. The makers also managed to add psychological depth to the narrative. What sets this movie apart from the competition is the intelligent use of your surroundings. Jean-Luc Godard doesn't have any special effects and instead relied on the architecture of Paris to show sort of a broken and dystopian society. The viewers were able to connect with this movie on a deep level, and that made it a game changer. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, 1956. Invasion of the Body Snatchers is a movie that every sci-fi fan needs to watch. Released in 1956, this movie made you doubtful of your neighbor's intentions and a possible alien invasion. The vibe of the movie was about the Cold War and the fear of communist takeover. The story of the film is about a local physician who starts noticing a weird anomaly. People have started experiencing a change in their partners and family members, and no, it's not because of a midlife crisis or a teenage problem, it's much deeper than that. Upon further investigation, it's found that the town of Santa Mira has actually been taken over by extraterrestrial beings who have replaced the humans with emotionless pods. Our favorite physician tries his best to warn everyone and resolve the situation, which leads to the climax that leaves us with dread and uncertainty. We actually don't want to spoil the ending of this one, and you should watch it for yourself. Invasion of the Body Snatchers is a super engaging watch, and the directorial style keeps you on the edge of your seat. The film leaves a lasting impact, but according to us, it would have been much better if they added the original ending. Yes, the epilogue of the movie was changed to have a more hopeful outcome instead of a bleak and dystopian ending. Metropolis, 1927, an iconic sci-fi movie from an iconic director. Metropolis is one of the greatest works of Fritz Lang. It's also considered a breakthrough movie in terms of cinematic achievements. This movie gets a place on this list because of its dystopian setting and an interesting treatment. Metropolis is set in the dystopian future where there is a clear class divide, like the Hunger Games, but not exact. The rich are living in their towers while the working class is toiling in factories to keep them alive. The primary character of the movie is a person named Freder, who is the son of the city's mastermind. After living a life of privilege, he feels for the working class and unites with Maria to bring a sort of equality. But we all know it's not going to be that easy. This movie is a great social commentary on the divide during the time. Despite having a great story, Metropolis isn't exactly known for it. Instead, it's known for its special effects. This silent film is almost perfect in terms of visual quality. Everything from the tall buildings to the working class divide, it's just perfect. Considering it was released in 1927, Metropolis was way ahead of its time. Acclaimed filmmakers like Ridley Scott and George Lucas took inspiration from the works of Fritz Lang and held him in high regard. As a result, you can see the influence of Metropolis in huge franchises like Blade Runner and Star Wars. To appease the international markets, this movie was cut down in different ways, and no one got to see the original version until it was discovered in Argentina in 2008. It took around 80 years for people to enjoy the unedited version of this masterpiece, and if you're a fan of creative filmmaking and want to make movies of your own, then Metropolis is a flick you should definitely check out. Them, 1954. We have a Warner Bros. Production on our list, and it's none other than Them. Although the name is a bit peculiar, the same can't be said about the movie. Them is directed by Gordon Douglas and released in the same year as Godzilla, and it's one of the first monster movies from Hollywood, and it's actually really good. Now, we all know the terrifying after effects of atomic bombs and the power of radiation, how it can mutate creatures. Well, that is the plot of this movie. A detective and a scientist in the deserts of New Mexico discover an anomaly that's too massive to ignore. Following the many nuclear tests in New Mexico, the ants start to mutate due to the radiation and are now gigantic in size. The ants are quickly growing in number and start to make their way to Los Angeles. FBI agent Robert Graham and scientist Dr. Harold Medford and his daughter are trying their best to contain these creatures. Them enjoyed massive success post-release due to the increasing fear of the effects of an atomic bomb. The movie was a commercial success, and many filmmakers also tried their hand at similar giant monster movies. It was also a successful venture for Warner Bros. Productions, who later went on to make many movies on an astronomical scale and, of course, still do so today. Apart from changing the genre, this movie would also be considered the first full-scale 3D movie ever if things had turned out a bit different. The Day the Earth Stood Still, 1951. The 1950s were an interesting period for cinema as there were many movies regarding alien invasions and the exploration of the unknown. This period was also rife with events like the Cold War and gave rise to many scientific innovations. The same thing happened with cinema, and new techniques and visual effects were born. The Day the Earth Stood Still is a movie preaching for peace while the world was ready for destruction. An alien aircraft arrives at Washington, D.C., and inside is a humanoid alien who has come to advise the people of Earth. Klaatu, the alien, is striving for peace, but also gives the people of Earth a stern warning. The world must put a stop to the nuclear arms race and instead strive for peace, or else the Intergalactic Alliance will fight them. Klaatu then gets a deep understanding of human beings and feels the struggle behind their existence. To put an end to the entire arms race, Klaatu shows his cosmic strength and shuts down the Earth for 30 minutes. Must have been a nice breather for our planet. What stands out in this film is the ultimate message of peace. It was a favorite in pop culture, and audiences started to love it for its profound messaging. If you want to watch a movie that inspires you and gives you hope, then maybe consider The Day the Earth Stood Still. A Trip to the Moon, 1902. One of the oldest movies on the list and probably the first sci-fi movie ever, A Trip to the Moon is studied by many who are interested in the art of filmmaking. It's set in a fictionalized era of the 20th century where a group of scientists built a rocket and sent it to the moon. They soon find out they aren't alone and are sharing the moon with many creatures unheard of. This movie is known for its groundbreaking use of special effects. Everything you see in the movie, from the stop motion to the multiple exposures, is done for the first time ever. Directed by George Méliès, A Trip to the Moon was the first movie with exceptional visual effects for the time. Just think about the most technologically advanced movie that you've ever seen, now multiply that by 100. That was the audience's reaction when they first saw A Trip to the Moon. Every movie you see on this list is at least partially inspired by this film in one way or another. Also, this century-old movie was lost and recently rediscovered so that viewers could take a trip to the renaissance of cinema. The Invisible Man, 1933. What would you do if you could turn invisible? This is a question that comes up in almost every part of a social gathering that we've been to. Seems like director James Whale was plagued by the same question when he first came up with the film The Invisible Man. A doctor named Jack Griffin discovered a drug that makes him invisible. First, he uses this power to advance technology and contribute towards science, but slowly he starts to descend into madness with his new powers. Maybe he never heard the quote, "With great power comes great responsibility," because next thing he does is commit a gruesome murder. This movie makes it onto the list because of its sound design. It's one of the first movies that uses sound to advance the narrative and almost uses it like a special effect. The crew of the movie should get all the praise for their extreme hard work. They came up with transparent costumes and nifty camera work just to create the illusion of invisibility. The filmmakers incorporated a lot of different strategies, like the use of hidden wire to showcase a sequence where we can see just dancing clothes because Jack Griffin was invisible. The Invisible Man was super revolutionary during the time of its release, and audiences were mesmerized after seeing, or rather not seeing, an invisible person on the big screen. Conclusion. From Flash Gordon to Godzilla, the black and white era was super promising for the betterment of cinema. Filmmakers like Spielberg and Lucas were inspired from this and later mastered the craft of sci-fi films. So, in conclusion, these movies have stood the test of time and should be applauded for their innovations and the bold choice that the filmmakers made during that time. It was the initial and experimental phase of cinema that eventually got us to where we are today. We wouldn't have classics like Interstellar or Avatar if there were no black and white sci-fi movement. With that, unfortunately, our video comes to an end. If you enjoyed it, then we recommend you check out similar movie-related content on the Marvelous Videos channel. Also, if you think we might have missed a movie, then we want to hear about it in the comments section down below. If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. And of course, as always, thank you and stay marvelous.